This is the Sabbath School lesson for the first quarter, 2022.
Lesson 2, the Message of Hebrews, ready for teaching on January 8. It's authored by Dr. Felix Cortez, Associate Professor of New Testament Literature in the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews University, and your reader for today is Dr. Percy Harrold. Friday, January 7. Despite all the good and hopeful truths in the book of Hebrews, there also is a series of warnings that reach their climax in chapters 10 to 12. These sections have at least two common elements. First, they all compare the desert generation with the readers of Hebrews. Second, they exhort us to have faith. The desert generation was the one that saw the amazing power of God unleashed in signs and wonders in their deliverance from Israel. They also heard God speak from Mount Sinai the 10 Commandments. They saw the column of fire in the night and the protecting cloud during the day. They ate manna, bread from heaven. They also drank water that sprang from the rocks wherever they camped. But when they arrived at the border of the promised land, they were not able to trust God. They lacked faith, which is the core of what God requires. As it says in Hebrews 11:6, without faith it is impossible to please him. Paul says that we, like the desert generation, also are at the border of the promised land, as you read in Hebrews 10, verses 37 to 39. For yet a little while, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry. Now the just shall live by faith, but if anyone draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who draw back to perdition, but of those who believe in the saving of the soul. Our privileges and responsibilities are greater, however. We did not hear God speak at Mount Sinai, but we have seen through Scripture a revelation of God greater than the one at Mount Zion. God in the flesh, Jesus Christ, as we read in Hebrews 12:18 to 24. For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them any more. For they could not endure what was commanded, and if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I am exceedingly afraid and trembling. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. The question is, will we have faith? Paul encourages us to follow the example of a great list of characters, which culminates with Jesus himself. And that brings us to our 3 discussion questions for this week. 1. We have learned that Jesus is our champion who goes before us into the battle against the devil. How can we fight together, united as a church, behind our champion? What are those things that prevent this unity from happening? What are ways that Satan can weaken us as a church? How did Satan weaken Israel in the past? 2. As believers, we are a community of priests under God's direction. In what ways can your local church offer better sacrifices of praise and good works to God? Please be specific and practical. 3. In what ways is our situation similar to the situation of the desert generation just before crossing into the promised land? What lessons can we learn from the similarities? Inside Story. Our mission story this week is titled Miraculous Rock. It's by Andrew McChesney. A miracle rock stopped the pickup truck of Bunprani Vanadi, who was serving as president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Laos. It was just an ordinary creek. Any car could pass through its shallow waters easily. No car was known to have ever gotten stuck there. But the pickup truck decided to stop just as it entered the creek. It simply stopped. Burnpurnee and 2 young pastors travelling with him found a rock blocking the way, but it seemed to be too small to stop the vehicle. Just to make sure, they moved the rock and tried to restart the vehicle. It refused to start. They hailed down a passing car and tried to jump-start the battery, but the pickup truck still refused to start. Since it was getting dark, Burnpurnee walked to the nearest village. Several villagers came back to the pickup truck to help, but they couldn't get it to start. The village chief invited Burnpurnee to spend the night in his house, while the young pastors stayed with the pickup truck. "What are you doing in our area?" the village chief asked. Burnpurnee explained that he was taking some sporting equipment to the next village. He was hoping to establish a connection with that village. As he listened, the village chief sensed that Burnpurnee was a Christian, and he announced that he was a Christian. He pulled out a Voice of Prophecy Correspondence School certificate issued by the Seventh-day Adventist Church of Laos several years earlier. He said he had reached out to a former church leader for support several years earlier, but had been dismissed. So now he and about 200 other villagers were worshipping Jesus on their own. He asked Burnpurnee to teach him and the villagers about the seventh-day Sabbath. It was at that moment Burnpurnee realized an angel must have stopped the pickup truck. It was like Balaam's donkey, who refused to go farther because it saw an angel of the Lord. This car must have seen an angel of the Lord standing in front of it in the creek, so it decided to stop. The next morning, the pickup truck started at the first turn of the key. And there's a photograph of the truck with its front wheels in the water. Thank you for your Sabbath School mission offering that will help spread the gospel to the people of Laos and the other countries of the Southern Asia-Pacific Division. Part of this quarter's 13th Sabbath offering will help open an elementary school in Laos. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.